Hi, boys and girls. Today we'll read the end of our new story called Bone Button Borscht, and we will continue to work on answering the question, how can food nourish a community? As you can see on our pictures here, we have pictures of our Lakeland community, and it might look like with your community where you live. In your community, there's lots of different places where you can get food that can help nourish your body. It's very important that a community has food to nourish it so that all the members of the community can stay healthy. Today, when we finish reading this story, Bone Button Borscht, we will work to answer the rest of the, we will work to retell the rest of the elements of the story like good readers do. Yesterday, we worked on describing the setting, the characters, and some of the actions of some of the characters for the first half of the book. Today, we will record the rest of the actions of the characters and describe the problem and the ending of the story. Now, yesterday, when we started reading this story, you might have seen some similarities between the two books that we've been reading in this module. These are two fiction books that have some similar things in the story. Yesterday, when you were reading, did you notice that there's a character tricking other characters in both of these stories? Did you notice that a big group of people work together to make some food? Did you also notice that there is an unusual ingredient in both of the soups in this story? Did you also notice how the big groups of people first thought they weren't going to get along, but by the end of the story, they get along and work together to make a new food or something to nourish the community? As we finish reading our book today, you will get to finish your chart. Yesterday, you should have started your settings, characters, and actions of some of the characters in your notebook or by typing. Today, we're going to add some more actions to that chart and conclude with our problem and ending of our story. Let's get back to the story. Bone Button Borscht. As you remember where we left off, all the townspeople had lots of items in their hands and were rushing back to the synagogue. They were following the shamus. "Where are you going?" they asked. "What are you doing with that pot?" And the people in the street replied, "There's some beggar in the synagogue who says he can make borscht from buttons." "That's impossible," shouted the people in the houses. But they were curious, so they grabbed their hats and coats and joined the others. Whoops, this silly page is upside down. You can pay attention closely to the pictures, if you can turn your head upside down, and I'll read the words to you. By the time the shamus reached the synagogue, the whole town was with him. The people crammed themselves inside. The beggar looked up and cried, "Shalom l'chaim, peace be with you." There was a long silence. Then someone called out, "So, Mr. Miracle Man, make us a miracle." "You want a miracle?" the beggar asked. "I'll give you a miracle." "Pot!" he cried. They put the pot on the stove. "Water!" They poured in the water. "Button!" They gave him the button. Plunk, plunk, plunk. The beggar dropped in all the bone buttons. Wow, look at everyone's face. He picked up the wooden spoon and stirred. When the pot began to steam and bubble, he spooned out some water and took a sniff. "Not bad," he said, "but it could be better." "What could make it better?" asked the people. "A little sugar, a little salt, a little pepper. That could make it better," replied the beggar. So they brought him sugar and salt and pepper. He sprinkled them into the pot and stirred. Then he took another sniff. "Not bad," he said, "but it could be better." "What could make it better?" asked the people. "Have you got any pickle juice?" "That could make it better," replied the baker. So they brought him pickle juice and poured it into the pot. The beggar stirred and then stopped. He looked at the people. He looked at the pot. He looked at the people again. Then he shook his head. "You've got problems, Mr. Beggar?" asked the shamus. The beggar frowned. "Wait," said the shamus. He ran to the cupboard and brought back a bulk of garlic. "Would this help, Mr. Beggar?" he asked. "Why not?" laughed the beggar. "Mr. Beggar, I've got some carrots," someone said. "And I've got beets," called another. "I've got onions. I've got beans. Would these help, Mr. Beggar?" they asked. "They wouldn't hurt," laughed the beggar. So the people ran off and returned with their full arms of veggies. The beggar sliced them all. He diced, he chopped, he shredded. Then he dumped them into the bubbling pot, and he stirred with borscht round and round. "Do you know what we have done?" asked the beggar. "We have a beautiful borscht. That's what we have, a very tasty borscht. Now, some people say a little bit of cabbage really brings out the flavor, but I keep it simple. Who needs cabbage for borscht?" At the back of the synagogue, a woman waved her arms. "Mr. Beggar, you want cabbage? I've got cabbage, Mr. Beggar." Before he could reply, the woman was gone. She returned with a sack full of cabbages and handed it to the beggar. He looked at the cabbages. He looked at the people. Then he shrugged his shoulders and began to chop. He chopped every last cabbage. He chopped until every last cabbage had been added to the borscht. The people watched the steam rise from the pot. They listened to the bubbling borscht. They smelled the sweet, rich, sour aroma as it filled the synagogue. Bellies rumbled, mouths watered, and everyone pressed in closer when the beggar finally ladled some borscht into a cup. It was deep red and thick with vegetables. He blew on it. He blessed it. Then he dipped in his spoon and tasted it. "So, Mr. Beggar, how does it taste?" Wow, look at these beautiful colors the illustrator included in this text. I'm noticing a lot of spoons. I'm noticing a red kind of broth in the soup. And in the very center, I think I see a button. Right there. The beggar smiled. "Not bad. Who wants to try some?" Everyone in the room rushed forward. They snatched cups. They grabbed bowls. "Borscht, borscht, borscht," they chanted. The beggar patiently ladled steaming hot borscht into every bowl and cup. Soon everyone was sipping and slurping borscht. Then the people raised their arms. They rolled their eyes towards heaven, and they cried out, "Delicious! Perfectly perfect! Delicious! This is the best borscht we have ever tasted. The little beggar did it! He made borscht out of buttons! It's a miracle!" Then, like magic, bread appeared and boiled potatoes and roast chicken and wine. The people ate and they laughed and they laughed and they ate. Then they brought out accordions and violins and they sang and they danced for hour after hour. Delightful hour. And when the last slurp of borscht was slurped, the last dance danced, the last song sung, the shamus invited the beggar to spend the night at his house. The next night another family took him in, and another, and then another. Wow. One day the beggar gathered the townsfolk together to say goodbye. "Please don't go," they begged. "I must," he said. "But your buttons! How can we make borscht without your magic bone buttons?" "And how can I fasten my coat without my buttons?" he asked the beggar. "How can I keep warm without buttons?" So they traded with the beggar. They gave him brass buttons for bone buttons. Then the beggar left. They never saw him again. The years passed. One by one, the beggar's bone buttons were lost. But it is A strange thing, a wonder perhaps, the townsfolk learned that they didn't really need the buttons. They learned to make borscht without them, and they learned to help one another without borscht, even in hard times. That was the real miracle the beggar left behind. Oh, wow. Notice how everybody's holding hands together in the picture. That is an awesome story. I like how it ended pretty happily, and it seemed like the townsfolk learned a lesson by the end. So let's go back and review. Yesterday, we included details about the setting, the characters, and the actions of the characters helping out the beggar. Now today, let's record some of the ideas of what our problem and the ending was. There was several problems in this story. One of our problems is that the townspeople were being greedy and did not want to help a person in need. Another problem is that the beggar had nowhere to stay and nothing to eat, and no one wanted to help him. Another problem was that the beggar didn't have any ingredients or tools for making his soup. By the end, we know that everybody in the town worked together to help the beggar make the soup for everybody. And by the very end of the story, the townspeople learned that they needed to help each other even in hard times. Now it's your job to finish your SCAPE chart in your notebook or by typing. Today I want you to record any more actions of the characters, one of the problems in our story, and how our story ended. If you need to rewind this video and go back to the pages in the text, you can. Add it to your great work from what you started yesterday, and then you'll be done for the day. Thanks so much for working hard, friends.